If your bearing sounds like this, then it's probably time to change it. And this is what you need for the front. You need the special tool, you need the bearing, one for each wheel, you need 2 seals and a split pin. And then it's probably a good idea to get a new bearing nut as well. And for the rear you also need the special tool. You will need 1 bearing per wheel, 1 seal, and it's probably a good idea also to get a new axle nut, a new bearing nut or bearing retaining ring, and a new grease cap or hubcap. First up is the front wheel bearing, and this is the manual I'm using for specifications information. You start with removing the split pin, and after that you use a number 32 socket to remove the castle nut, and then you can push out and pull out the drive shaft from the hub very easily. The next thing is drilling out the old peening point. Peening point is the deformation that has been made into the nut, into the retaining ring, using a punch to prevent it from unscrewing itself. And after that you need to remove the inner seal, a bit of force, a big screwdriver or chisel. And then for the next step you will need the special tool to undo the retaining ring, and with it comes a warning.
You have to be super careful if you use this tool here with an impact driver like this. If you put this on and you don't have it on your nut and you turn it on now, this thing will just fling out at high speed, and you may never see it again, or you may hurt yourself. In fact, I'm going to use some hot glue so that this does not cause any harm. So now you have to remove the old bearing, and the way to do it, you need a drift, and that drift has to be small enough to hit the axle but not touch the bearing itself. I'm using a nut here, it's a number 27 nut, and that just fits nicely, and I'll see if I can hammer it out. Okay, so using my drift, the whole bearing came apart. One race came off, the other it didn't. It's still here attached to the stub axle, and also the seal is still in, so I'll have to remove these separately. Start with the seal. So just punch, hammer that out, and it will come out. There we go. And now I'll take this to my workbench and see how I'll get this race off the stub axle.
There should be a distance of 1.5 millimeters between the seal and the bearing, and I did some calculations and measurements, and in my case that means that there is 1 millimeter from the face of the bore to the face of the seal. So later when I install the seal, I just push it in by 1 millimeter.
Can now take a new bearing, apply a bit of grease inside and on the race as well, insert it here from the back, and now we'll have to press this in. So it's quite important to keep your drift centered exactly where aligned with the bearing you're hammering in, because you don't want to hammer into your new bearing. So the way I like to do it, I put the old bearing into the race, which I'm using as a drift, and then I use this plastic insert which is from the new bearing, and that's inserted here. So this will center my drift perfectly. That's the way it's recommended. Let's do it then. This is the way the seal goes in here, the seal lips, and they go facing the bearing. So this is how we put it in. Bit of grease to help. I'm using the old seal as a drift. Of course I cleaned it first, and bit of timber, and I'll carefully hammer it in until it's about 1 millimeter in. Calculation I've done before, so this one here should be in about 2.5 millimeters. It's pretty much pulling out again from the edge. I'm putting our wheel hub. And then you insert the drive shaft back in, and I insert it even before I've hammered the hub back in, because I don't like hammering against the bearing, so I use this to pull in the hub the rest of the way. Tighten the nut, and that will push the hub in, and that is much nicer for the bearings than hammering it. Because this drive shaft rests against the inner race of the bearing, so you don't have any actual forces on the bearing.
Now, as for the rear bearings, I've not been able to film it all, but it's the same basically as the front, except that it is simpler. So if you've done the front, you will have no problem doing the rear bearings as well. So here are just a few hints. The good thing with the rear is that the bearing and the seal and the ring are inside the drum. So once you pull off the drum, you just carry it to your workbench, remove the seal, the bearing and the bearing ring, reinstall a new bearing, and then reinstall the drum, and you're done. And that's all. Goodbye.